Today on our show, I have a guest. I define him as the drummer's drummer. Without further ado, I've got Kellii Scott from Failure on the show. Thank you for coming on board today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To get right to it, dealing with health scares and overcoming, a lot of obstacles with your health. How is your daily, living right now?
Well, I mean, it kind of starts with it's funny you use the word obstacle. I think most people look at things that they don't want in their life as some sort of obstacle. So the first thing I do is I'm very careful not to call things obstacles, because in my experience, um, what things that would normally be called an obstacle or a negative have changed my life in ways that are like more dramatic than, say, things that I sought out or positive things that I wanted. One thing I found is in life, like, things just happen, and the only thing I have to do is show up and meet them all with equal force, to get to the other side of it. Um, but I've found that things that we as humans tend to call negative are the things that I've gotten to the other side of, and subsequently have changed my life in ways that are much more dramatic and much more positive, and enriched my life in ways that, first off, I would have never predicted. And secondly, in ways that are completely like life affirming, and just changed and or even widened the path that I was already on. I just try and show up to all of this stuff. I mean, you're right. There's so many things that are going on in general for all of us. And at the same time, I've had a couple other things, happen in my life that have just kind of got thrown in the mix. And oddly, some of the craziness that we're all going through have made some of the dramatic things that have just happened to me. I won't beat around the bush. We'll say the elephant in the room, or the elephant that was in the room, being cancer. Um, Being locked down for COVID in a lot of ways has helped me get through that a lot easier, and sort of given me the ability to just concentrate on that. So, it's they're just things that you have to deal with. For me, they haven't been good or bad. I just show up
Yep.
and, do my best to get to the other side of them. Oddly, all of these dramatic things are sort of happening at the same time, have helped me get through to the other side, and given me sort of the personal focus to just deal with cancer, because I don't have to go outside, and I don't have to do the job and the running around and all the things you do in a normal society when, a pandemic hasn't hit everyone. So that was kind of nice to just take a couple days off and have a surgery, and then get right back to work, which essentially was just sitting here on the couch continuing to recover.
The surgery, the recovery, has it reset everything? Has it given you a new kind of perspective on how to create music?
Yes and no. I mean, since March, kind of the arc of everything that you just mentioned has changed a little bit. In a sense, when, someone says, "Oh, you've got cancer," and, as soon as you hear the word cancer, you're like, "Oh shit, that there's a possibility that I could die." Obviously, everything in your life takes on a completely new perspective, whether it's just living or showing up to things that you found really mundane before. Your relationships with, the world around you, your wife, your animals, everything is like, wow, I could lose all of this stuff. So obviously the relationship to everything changes in that way. In another way, music to me is always like a really great refuge where when the outside world is pushing you and pulling you and can tend to get a little tough, you can always go into music to set all of that stuff aside and gain refuge. I've known that for a very long time, and personally, I try to make sure that music doesn't become nothing but a dumping ground for me. I want it to be a creative space that I go to because I want to, not because I need to. So because of the cancer, because of the pandemic, obviously in the very beginning of all this, I hadn't been able to play music because I was dealing strictly with cancer and wasn't in the physical state to do it. It certainly would have been a perfect mental state for me to go and dump all this stuff into. But luckily, because I wasn't able to do it, I was able to refine some of my other tools to mentally and physically deal with these types of things. I previously in life, before I got sober, when it came to tools, I was a one-trick pony, and I would just dump everything into playing music. And as an adult, you can't really continue to do that, or it starts to become a destructive force in your life, because you're just dumping stuff there. You're not actually dealing with these things on an emotional level. Like they're still inside of you
Yeah, you're
somewhere,
masking it. Yes.
festering. So it was nice to not be able to play, so I could get into a place where, as a person, I had to like deal with these things as they were happening in a really constructive and positive way. Whether it be doing yoga every day or meditating or writing lists to myself, like what is it that you're going through? What is it that you're afraid of regarding A, B, and C? What's the worst thing that can happen? Is that thing actually going to happen, or are you just being really fearful and projecting that thing into existence? And I mean, the list goes on
Yeah.
of things that you can do for yourself that, fall under the umbrella of self-care. Um, in my previous life, I had always used music for that thing because I didn't have the tools to be able to do those things for myself. Nobody had ever taught me. I was raised in a way that I was given a certain set of tools and a toolbox. And at a really young age, I went out into life and found myself more times than not using a hammer when I needed a wrench or a screwdriver. I didn't have a wrench or a screwdriver in my toolbox. So, I used the tools that I had until they stopped working. And, my life burned to the ground. And fortunately, a lot of that was sort of had to do with substance abuse. That was one of the tools that I would use to get through everything. But fortunately, things are very, very, very different for me today. So back to the creative thing, sort of the first couple months, that's where I was at. I couldn't go to, my normal creative thing, just, getting behind a drum set and playing, whether it was a gig or something I was doing for fun, or coming up with beats that I would give to the guys as maybe a starter idea for a new song, or, someone online hiring me to do a song or a record. I wasn't doing those things. Nobody was doing those things. Um, and then, I had surgery and stuff and physically started to feel better. I would get in my car and I would drive out to the studio, once a week and just take it really, really, really slow. Because they were, I had two pretty major surgeries back to back. So the last thing I wanted to do was injure myself more. Um, So, I mean, I just took it slowly. And, for whatever reason, I think the universe knows what's best for you, how
Yeah.
much, and when is too soon and when is the right time. So, I just quietly did the things that were in front of me, and slowly, requests to do musical things started to come here and there. And I had put in some of the personal sort of physical work that I would be ready when those things did start to happen.
Hmm.
Um, uh, most of which being I just took off of work for like 3 weeks, and the band spent 3 weeks writing and jamming and just coming up with new material. It's kind of where we're at. We can't do live gigs. We had to cancel all those live gigs that we were supposed to be doing back in July. So we, set aside 3 weeks where every day we just, as a band, showed up, like any other job, and just rocked out and played music. And there were some kind of finished ideas, some small ideas is sort of where we started, and then we moved into just somebody playing something and everybody joining in and kind of jamming, see where that would take you. And subsequently, I mean, if you ask me, we got way too much material. There's like 36 hours of recorded ideas.
Were you always the entity of just like, let me just lay down a track and everything kind of developed through that process? How was your creativity with the band?
Well, I mean, a bit of everything. I mean, when we go back, like I joined the band for Magnified. Magnified was just being finished. So it was my job to learn all of the material on the record. And in doing that, the guys wanted me to feel like I was a part of the band and that I was contributing something. So they gave me a little bit of creative freedom, which I needed anyway, because the way some of those songs were recorded, some of the drum parts you couldn't actually play as a human being because they were mostly programmed. So you had to be able to take a little bit of creative freedom. So as soon as I entered the band, I think they gave me a little bit and sort of wanted to get to know me and see where this was going to go. So the next big thing would have been when we locked ourselves away and wrote and recorded Fantastic Planet. And it kind of a little bit of everything. Sometimes a fully fledged idea would come in, and much in the way on Magnified, I would use a lot of that because I respect their ideas. I didn't necessarily need to write my own thing. I mean, if it works and it's really good, then let's do it. Is kind of always the way I approach things. And there were other instances where I was just writing a beat, playing a beat, another space song or heliotropic, and those things turned into songs. Yeah. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's pretty much everything is nothing is off limits, and we still kind of stick to that today. There is no set way of our approach to doing what it is that we do, to being creative. We like to stay open because we like the idea that every time we make a new record, it's going to be a new record. Meaning, we always have to be open to incorporating a new way of doing things in order to achieve something that we haven't achieved yet. Yeah. So we're not like most bands. I know most bands, having played in a lot of bands myself, have an approach. And in my opinion, like if you have a approach, then you're not going to be very creative. It might work really well the first time, and then the second time not as well, and the third time even less well. Eventually, it just doesn't work anymore. Or you keep churning out the same exact thing over and over and over and over, which, whether it's good or not, what I'm looking for, what charges me creatively, is not doing the same thing over and over.
Well, with that in mind, you've been in several other bands and worked on various projects. Is that kind of like the key to keep that creative flowing, is to kind of interact with maybe different genres, different sounds?
If you're going to be in a band for a long time, it requires everyone in the band to have that same approach. But if you're looking at other projects that I've done, I think that you can successfully do it a few times, which all of those other bands, like I've only done it a few times with those other bands. I think if I use my approach that I've always used for everything, you can have a couple people that want to do the same stuff over and over. And as long as you're only working in that project a few times and then you leave, you've successfully been creative for the duration of that project. Eventually it starts to break down and you sort of have to have a heart to heart with people. Like, you know, I know you like doing that finger pick thing, but like if you listen to our 2 previous records, that's kind of all you're doing. And it just doesn't work anymore. Like, what are you listening to musically? Yeah. Like, there's so many things in the world to make your personal musical language so much bigger from day to day. You know, even if it's just going to one of the other members in your band and saying, hey, what would you play? You know, and then they give you a part to play or expound on the part that you're playing. Yeah. You know, after you record said thing, you walk away and your arsenal and personal vocabulary is bigger because you know, asked for the assistance of somebody else. How would they interpret these parts? That's another beautiful thing in Failure is, you know, Ken can write really great drum parts. Greg can write and play really great drum parts. And so can I. And I don't necessarily have to write my own drum part. Like, I'm open to someone else having a great idea because those ideas in turn become part of me moving forward. You know, it's just making my arsenal of things in my library that much bigger. Yeah. You know, I think that's a really big part of any success that I've ever had is being able to take input from other people. You know, my ego doesn't work in that way. My ego comes out when it comes to working hard.
Yeah. The more that I read up on Failure, you know, the first thing it says LA based band, you know, do you draw inspiration from being in the LA area? Is that, do you feel like your band has that sound or no, not at all?
No. And even before I was in the band wasn't necessarily part of that thing, that LA scene. Like, they all lived in Los Angeles. But that's kind of as far as it went. There were early on a couple bands that they really respected and had kind of a kinship, like obviously the Tool guys. You know, they all ran in the same circle and had a mutual respect for one another. So, you know, often we did shows together.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's very select cases where being part of the LA scene was an actual physical thing that played out in the life of the band. Mm-hmm. But that was early on. That was like 93, 94. You know, I think Failure has always kind of been on the outskirts of being a member of any like scene or musical movement or, you know, I think the inspiration of the band and the music is very insular. I think is why, in my humble opinion, we've successfully, each time we set out to make a record, we're successful at doing it. But only in the sense that we retain, I think, the musical integrity and being able to sound different from record to record while still sounding like Failure, because we're not part of this thing and we don't have people to please. You know, our motivation is strictly from a personal standpoint. Like, we're the only ones that know whether this is a great record or not. Mm-hmm. And we're the only ones that are going to know whether we like listening to this actual record. You know, and if you can achieve those 2 bars, then the record's done and it's ready to be put out. And, you know, hopefully the people who have been into the band on previous records will continue to be. You kind of alluded earlier, like a drummer's drummer or, you know, your favorite band's favorite band. I think the only reason that is because we're, you know, we fight the good fight, whatever that thing is. You know, we're not trying to please anyone. We've gotten this far without selling any records. You know, why would we change what we're doing now?
from a creative standpoint, it's inspiring, because if you think about the timeline, there was a huge break in the band, and then all of a sudden, you guys resurge, put out some albums, and each album is better. And with that in mind, I see the artistry in there. Do you take cues from anything as far as films and art, anything that draws inspiration?
And there are a couple instances where, obviously the song Solaris was informed by Andrei Tarkovsky, the director of Solaris. But, I think individually as band members, we do each love a lot of the same things, but we also each have our own lives, and each one of our lives has its own unique set of circumstances and musical and art that informs each one of us separately. And then we all come together to do this thing, and that thing is a direct result of everything that informs you as a creative person. We all love and adore movies, like as much as music. I go to the museum a lot. Well, not a lot. I'm not like a crazy art person. I probably go to the museum more than anyone else in the band. Yeah. I think each one of us has our own, things that inform us that become part of this thing we call failure. Yeah. And definitely movies are going to be part of that. Art is going to be part of that. Like, in a way that I think we're all very sensitive to directly borrowing things from people, bordering on plagiarizing or doing something that's been done by somebody else. Again, like just in general terms, those aren't the types of things that get any of us off. And I think we all know that we have as much to say that's as important to us saying it as, anybody. I don't think we have to re-say something somebody else said or did. But I mean, you can't, I mean, it's a great question. It's really hard to give a direct, definitive answer because you are the sum of your parts, and the sum of your parts are you.
To be upfront, I listen to music, to get in a certain mindset before I pick up a camera, before I go do something. And 9 times out of 10, to clear my head, I'm listening to music.
Yeah, no, in that sense, personally, no. I find that to be the most creative, I have to empty out of any consciousness whatsoever. I tend to play and do my best when I can empty myself of thinking about what I'm doing. And that's one of the things, actually, that's, to me, the one thing that keeps me coming back to music, because it's something that I can't do anywhere else in anything else. Like meditating a little bit, yoga a little bit, but there's nothing else that I have ever found that allows me to be in a state that is like being in the eye of a hurricane. It's completely quiet. It's completely still. My outside life and everything I'm going through or have to deal with no longer exists. And it's just a pure and unconscious reaction to what the other guy or guys are playing.
When did you experience that at an early age that you knew this is what I have to do? This is what I love.
I mean, I experienced it in two very distinct ways. I experienced it once before I actually even started playing music. I was probably somewhere between 5 and 7. And I looked at the back of a Kiss record. I would play pots and pans and with Lincoln Logs and tennis rackets to like live Kiss records and perform in front of the mirror and like spit out Kool-Aid for the fake blood. And, turn to the side in front of the mirror and light a can of hairspray on fire like I was blowing fire. And, it was this whole elaborate, like, play fantasy thing. And I recall doing that while simultaneously looking at the insert of a Kiss record and seeing like thousands of people. And it very like physically and very tangibly dawned on me that if that was me, everything would be awesome and okay. So that was the me that I traveled through music from age 5 or 7 all the way through learning to play, to moving to Los Angeles, to getting into bands, to wanting to be rich and famous, until probably about the age of maybe 23, is when I finally realized that I had to take those things that were giving me reason and put them on the ground, because the rich and the fame and everything's going to be okay just isn't going to happen. That just isn't my path. So do I actually love what I'm doing? Am I good enough at what I'm doing? Does it fulfill me more than anything else to the level that I can be poor and unhappy and have nothing that all of the other normal people get to have? And that is the person that I walk through music still as today.
I think that's a very strong statement, because of the fact that, we are going through some difficult times. There's a lot of people out of work. There's a lot of people just struggling, just ready to give up. And I think it's interesting to hear is that, you if you have a gift and you got a passion or something you love, you just got to follow through. The fact that you mentioned you've already kind of created all these extra tracks you don't know what to do with. I never thought you'd be able to say, oh, we've got too much.
Funny enough, like that's one thing that has changed since we've gotten back together. On Fantastic Planet, we recorded as many songs as we wrote. There's two that were left over, but they weren't going to go on the record either, because one of them like was already represented on the record, or the other one was just a little too weird and it came too late. But for the most part, the songs that we wrote, we recorded, and that was the record. 106 or 8 minutes of music. When we started doing The Heart is a Monster, when we got back together, we started doing this thing more liberally than we had before. We did it a little bit on Fantastic Planet before we moved into a house and started recording. We kind of got together and would jam and come up with little ideas and stuff like that and record them. So when we went into the house, we would have a little bit of material to draw from. So we had a little bit of that, and then we had things that people were individually writing either the day of or had demos of preceding going into the studio. But when we flash forward, the band breaks up, we get back together. For Heart is a Monster, when we started playing together as a band again and learning all the old stuff and relearning to play it as a band again and kind of figuring out what we were going to do, we started doing this thing where we would come in every day and we would record hours and hours and hours and hours of jam sessions. So by the end of Heart is a Monster, we had either 28 or 32 really good ideas out of about, probably 12 hours of recorded ideas. Ken went through most of it and whittled it down to these essential nuggets. But when we went to record The Heart is a Monster, we only used about 3, maybe 4 of those ideas. And then the rest we wrote as a band while we were in the studio showing up every day.
Interesting.
So flash forward to, we just did that again for this new record that we're starting. We didn't do that on the last record. In the future, you'll know, yada, 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 big, long title. But for this new record, we went back to that, and we got probably 4 times as much as we had that previous time. I think we've really stumbled onto a really crazy way and an easy way for us to be super, super productive and super, super, when you're jamming, when one guy just starts playing something and you just start playing along with them, and then another guy starts playing, and it becomes this moving machine that's constantly changing its part every other bar, and you're in this constant flux of creating something new that is ever changing. Sometimes it might only last, 4 bars and then it dies. Other times it might last up to like, we have jams that are like 45 an hour.
I mean, the way you describe it sounds like jazz jam sessions.
It's more akin to that. It's not like two guys going verse, chorus, intro, bridge. There's no thought whatsoever in like physically trying to construct, and you're playing loud, so you can't bark out orders to each other. You just kind of have to intuitively move around from part to part. Like, you can't really explain it. It happens when everyone has the same musical language. Like, there's a certain bond that you have, I think, to be able to pull something like that off in the first place. All I know is creatively, we have a bond that is nothing short of much larger than any one of us individually. Yeah. I if you think of it like, I only possess as much talent as I have. If you add another talented person to me, then we have twice the amount of talent and ability. And you add a third person, now we have 3 times the amount of talent and ability. And then you have that thing that I don't even know what it is. It's unquantifiable. It's trust. It's respect. It's all of these things that you have to have in equal proportion to have an amazing relationship with an individual, first of all. And then that translates into when you're being creative. It's just this entire package. Like, when the band broke up, I would always refer to the band as like my Led Zeppelin. Like, I'm never in the rest of my career gonna have what it is that I had with that band, because first of all, I wouldn't even be able to take 2 other guys, sit them down, and describe to them what it is that we have to have in order for this new band to be as great as my previous band. As great in the sense, to me, it checks off all of my boxes. It makes me happy, creative, and wanting more and to do more in every single way possible. Again, like when I, say I'm only referring to me, and I'm referring to me in the most humblest sense whatsoever. I'm not the guy that toots his own horn. I say we have a great band to me. Whether we're great or not is for a bunch of other people to decide, and that's only decided by how many records did you sell.
You bring up a lot of good points, and it seems that you're constantly creating and doing things. Prior to COVID, constantly innovating, constantly working, constantly thinking, getting things out. What if, say, for example, you weren't a drummer? Would you still be creative? Would you still be in some type of art kind of form? Would you be doing anything as far as, if you weren't a drummer, what would you be doing?
Music was definitely my vehicle. Given the places that I grew up, I got into music to escape to a larger, greater, more special environment than the one I was perceiving to be raised in. Less mundane, less boring. I think if I wouldn't have gotten into that, and I just would have gone through school, and I probably would have done something that had me using my mind, like as an application, much more than like my physical and creative. Maybe I think I'm creative. No matter, yeah, you're right. I have a 9-to-5 job, and even in that job, I have a very intuitive, creative sense. that I find some people that are just showing up to work because you have to show up to work to pay your rent.
I mean, your wife is also a photographer too, right? She's creative, so that influence has got to rub off on you.
I think I'm a creative being for whatever reason. I don't think it's because of me. I think it's just maybe something that was in my soul that would have found a way to come out one way or another, whether I became a scientist or a politician or, even like I said, the normal job that I do. I have a very creative sense, and I'm always looking for ways to enhance or create a new product within the software that we do.
Got to like segue into this. And what is the most rewarding experience? Do you have something where there's a certain show?
When we did the first reunion show, no, the whole reunion tour, that was the first time from one night to the next, every single night of that tour, I remember being completely consciously available to everything that was going on in the audience, which normally I don't tune into that. I find it really, really distracting. But I think that particular tour, it was all part of it. It wasn't just me concentrating on playing and playing the songs and the relationship with the band. It took on this totally different thing that I can remember in such a massive way, where all of it became a shared experience. Normally, when I approach a tour, when I approach a show, I'm all business. I'm really fucking concentrating, and I'm totally in my own insulated world, focused like nobody's business, and like nothing else that I do. Another one of those moments is, I give lessons from time to time, and I have like a very few students, and they're usually people that have never played before or are very young and inexperienced, like beginners. And when they learn something like pretty complex that they could have never done when they first came in, I also have that moment of like, I'm doing something that's fucking great for the world. Creatively, like, oh my God, that part I wrote or that record we did, like, those are all personal moments, and they all kind of pale in comparison to when you realize that your ripple went out into the world and affected positive change. Those are the things, those moments, which, I mean, there are a lot of. We could do an interview, just me talking about, like, those shared moments with the world around me. And they're not even always like having to do with music.
Yeah.
There's this like magic in the universe around us that, every religion probably has a name for it. I think that definition of it pales in comparison to what it really is, because as soon as you write it down, you've defined it. And it's everything and so much more than a person could ever imagine it to be.
Yeah.
But to me, I mean, like I said, I could go on forever. To me, I am in a unique position where I get to have and see the direct impact that I have on the world. So like moments like you get cancer and for whatever reason, you're not the person that dies from it. Well, the universe decided, and all of those moments where you affect change, or your music takes a person out of their life for a minute so they can get away from their suffering or whatever it is. When you're a small part of a really magnificent, beautiful world, music to me, more than anything else, affords me that possibility. Like that real possibility where it's very noticeable. So, my answer is that.
As far as impact in music, and I say this on a very light-hearted note, is that if you can get somebody in their 40s out on a Tuesday past 11 o'clock out at a club or a show to see your band, I mean, mission accomplished.
That's why we try to start earlier. Like,
And that's what it is. There's an impact. There's people there that want to see and just let loose. And I mean, I say this, you know, in this time and day and age, you know, everybody's going through, I mean, a gazillion things. Every day is a new mystery. You turn on the TV and we're all dealing with it.
it's so scary because where do you go? Who do you go to for guidance through it?
You know, what do you see as far as, you know, with this current environment is do you think there's going to be more of a resurgence of music that takes a stand, that addresses a lot of the things that are going on right now? Because I feel like there's certain pinnacle points in life that, you know, as far as musical influence, have changed me, woken me up to this, you know, topic. Do you think that's going to be that really big resurgence now?
You know, and I've never really thought about it until you put it like that. One thing that I find myself hopelessly optimistic for is, and this is mainly as a direct result of the pandemic. The pandemic, for people creating anything, has really leveled the playing field. Like the guy sitting at home with no resources has as direct an access to the forum of showing what he's created as the guy who works with, you know, megabucks donor or record company, or there's nothing a record company can do to help an artist right now. And there's probably nothing record companies are doing because it's a waste of their money and they don't spend money for no reason. So in saying that, I'm hoping that it's leveled the playing field a little bit so that, like, you know, normal Joe Schmo guy creating something at home gets as many eyes and ears as normal pro guy who has all these resources that he no longer has, that can only now create things at home and use the same medium that all the other regular people creating at home have.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that because the level field, the playing field has been leveled and everyone is on the same, has the same resources in order to reach the public abound, which is basically, you know, social media or crowdfunding sites. I'm hoping that we're going to see a huge creative force of a lot of voices and styles and sounds that we weren't getting before. And when the proverbial lights come back on, they'll have an equal opportunity to all the business starting up that,
Yeah.
you know, all the other people previously had.
I think if anything, I think people are waking up, but I think the way we listen and appreciate certain things are just going to change. Films are going to be consumed a different way. TV's going to be consumed a different way. I think, like, the way things are going, I think commercials are going to be gone. I think what people are seeing now is almost a transparency of just, it's not authentic.
Because I also see a deeper, simpler programming of the mass society at large, because now everyone is sitting in front of screens and their attention is always right here.
Yeah.
People can't go outside anymore. So I'm seeing a lot of, like, suspicious marketing efforts toward that vulnerability that people are stuck at home and always paying attention to their screen, even more so than before the pandemic. So, you know, what you said is true, but also, like always, on the converse to that, there's all this other, like, you know, dumbing a large part of society down going on as well.
On the flip side, the intelligent people that exist like long form content. That's where, you know, listen to your music. The songs are sometimes not 2 to 3 minutes. They're a little bit longer format. Did you ever think about, as far as a band, of maybe doing something as far as like a documentary behind the scenes? Now would be that kind of time to do something a little bit longer and expand upon?
You know, I mean, we have kicked around the idea of You know, there's kind of a documentary that's been bouncing around in the background for a couple of years. You know, we thought about for a second, like doing, you know, we were supposed to do all three records um, in three cities, and those got canceled. You know, we kicked around the idea for a second of doing all three records ourselves and pre-recording it as a movie. Um, we also, you know, before Hard as the Monster, we were kicking around the idea of writing a movie or a screenplay and using that to inform the music. I mean, it's difficult enough to make just, you know, a record, especially when you're doing everything yourself.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we're three people, we're all grown adults. You know, we all have families, we all have, you know, our own things in our own lives. Like finding the amount of time, like, you know, for us, it usually takes, when you put all the time together and condense it, it takes about 2 months for us to write, record, mix, and put all the pieces in place to have a physical product. It's about 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, you got to tack on more time to however long it takes to manufacture that and ship it out to the person. So that's just to make the music and the package. But of course, that never takes 2.5 months. It's 2.5 months condensed, which actually is over like a 6-month period.
Yeah.
You know, we physically spend 2.5 months over a 6-month period with our life doing just that thing. You know, when you go into like, you know, if we're going to shoot a music film, there's all these rehearsals for everything. And then, you know, it's much longer. Like you have to be able to walk out of your life for anywhere from 3 to 6 months and put your entire life and your family and everything on hold to do it. So first of all, the amount of money that it would take for each one of us to be able to pay our bills, to put our personal lives on hold and take care of our family at the same time is astronomical. There are a lot of obstacles, and we're the type of band that wants to continue working and putting things out. So if we were to do one of those projects the way that we have to do things, not relying on this big financial thing, you know, it would take us between 2 and 3 years, would be like the end of one of those big grandiose projects without having the resources to just do nothing but spend 6 months doing that.
And I see it coming now is that, you know, and I mentioned, you know, failure, your bandmates, you, or, you know, DIY, do it yourself and just keep on doing bigger, better, and different. And that's what I see is, you know, I'm reading about, for example, you know, prior music videos, upscaling the film, you know, and converting it, you know, the 1080 to HD to 4K. And that's where I'm like, if there's access to all this film, you know, that would be the great stepping stone to make a documentary, to get that all, you know, high res, you know, upscaled to, you know, put into something longer format. And to bounce back to the film scoring and coming out of film, I've always said for years, I'm like, I would drop what I'm doing to see something in that essence of a band, you know, a concept. I've always was a fan of musical acts, and I go back to, like, say for example, like Tommy, The Who, you know, just a band that just creates a film and it's their style. And I think with you and your two bandmates, I think that would be amazing.
You know, the beauty that is life is, you know, who knows? Maybe we're going to finish this new record and then out of nowhere, you know, this thing happens and the stars align and, you know, we have the resources to do a project that would take us 6 months.
Life is all about timing. To me, it's always been about rhythm and the rhythm of things. It may not, you know, I've worked on projects that, you know, when I worked on it in my 20s, I'm like, I wish I never did that. I wish I was a little bit more mature to maybe wait and work on something a little bit later in life.
I mean, that's how you become more mature.
Yeah.
It's all of the work itself and picking up little things here and there, what to do, what not to do. If you don't do all of those things, if you take those all away and you just like sit around and don't do the work, and in 4 years or 6 years decide to do the project,
Mm-hmm.
where are you going to get all of that like real life experience from that you decided to get rid of that was a mistake?
Yeah.
You know, there are no mistakes. You are a direct result of everything that you've done.
Obviously, nobody knows what the future is going to hold. Has there been discussions about maybe having a virtual concert, or just the possibility of, listen, we're just going to hold out to 2021 and we've got to play live?
Yeah, no, we've talked about it, and we've definitely decided isn't our thing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, what we're good at is getting people in a room to experience the whole enchilada. You know, you have to be in a room in order to be captivated by just, first of all, the large, rich sound that we produce. You know, and anyone, as much as you listen to the records on the greatest home stereo or your computer speakers, or, you know, you just can't, you can't capture that thing that we do by listening to us on a device. You know, that can get you by until the next time you have the opportunity to get into a room. And even part of that experience is like all the other people that are showing up to our shows. Like, we have a very unique fan base that have a very unique view and a very unique passion to showing up and seeing failure.
With the mix, with that experience, you know, I've listened to your music on different formats. Are you and Ken and Greg very hands-on when it comes to, it's got to sound like this on vinyl?
Yeah, no. As a band, we do everything. Like, we are the only and final say of all of it before it gets into a person's ears. Meaning all the record concept, the layout, the art, all of that stuff is internal within the band.
Yeah.
The music is internal within the band. Ken records and mixes and masters everything. Everything he works on, song by song, a version gets sent to everyone in the band, and we all sign off on it, and then he moves forward to the next song. The videos. Ken directs the videos. Ken edits the videos. But each iteration of that, like, he doesn't just go off and do this project and then turn it into the band. Like, everyone has direct input the whole process through. That being said, we are democracy. If two people decide they like something and the other person doesn't, you can get vetoed. You know, it depends on what that thing is. You know, if Ken and Greg like something and I don't, that doesn't mean they're going to do it. But as a band, they have permission to do it.
Yeah.
We all respect that rule. It doesn't always turn out like that, where you get outvoted. You know, we're not like a strict democracy. We don't want to ruin the relationship.
It sounds healthy, though. It sounds like a healthy relationship.
We had to break up and we had to walk away for 15 years in order to come back as a group of people that were able to do that for one another.
But it's interesting, the message that I keep on hearing, and again from the other artists and musicians that and directors that I've been talking about, is staying true to you, staying true to your creative, and no matter what, not having outside influences taint that. As far as, like, you know, if I say, for example, like music labels and whatnot, you know, producers telling you got to go this direction. That's where I like to think that this common theme of being creative is just, you know, kind of focus on you, you know, believe in you and believe in your craft, and really just be your own driving force.
Well, and we're fortunate enough that we put out our own records. So yeah, of course we would have the final say. I mean, just an example of, you know, the last box set thing we put out, you know, we send it to them and they master it and they put it off on vinyl. And before they create the vinyl, they send us each a test pressing. And we each sit down and listen to it, and it's got to be cool. You know, Magnified wasn't cool when they did the first test pressing. The volume level, first off, of the other two records was like up here, and Magnified was down here. And the only reason that is because Magnified was 40 minutes, which made the grooves smaller to put an entire record on one disc. So you couldn't meet the volume of the other records. Comfort is a much shorter record, giving you larger grooves. And Fantastic Planet is a double record, giving you 4 sides to make those grooves much larger. So what we had to do was, is this okay? Or should we make Magnified a double record? So the grooves are larger and we can bring the volume up to meet all of the other records in this box set, which is what we eventually agreed to. Or things like, they can fly the records so we can get them to people sooner, but it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. Well, we're the ones that have to pay for that. Or we can put it on a slow boat and it's going to take 2 weeks to get to New York and then we can fly it from there. So all of the decisions are made like as a band, more or less. Yeah. Whether it's creative input or input as to how all the moving parts work. We all decide on merch products. It's a band. It's one thing that has 3 brains.
And I think that really does resonate and get viewed and absorbed of how true you and your bandmates are when it comes to putting out the product, the image, everything. It's very transparent, and I said this to you earlier prior to the interviews that there's a certain sincerity that I think comes across. Second, I'm going to say this wrong. Was it Pledge Music?
Yeah, they fucked us over. They fucked everybody over.
Yeah, but the thing is, once that was addressed, everybody kind of started wrapping their head around it, like this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And again, taking the band side, and that's the thing, is I think with having that open line of communication, the way everything's been transpired with you and your bandmates as far as taking social media.
We were fortunate with that debacle. There were a couple months in there where it got like really hairy because we weren't entirely sure that they had stolen everybody's money. And we were almost done with the record. So we were kind of in this limbo for about 4 months where we couldn't directly tell the fan base what was actually going on, in jeopardy that, maybe they were going to pull it off and they were going to see our project through and not fuck us over, but they were still going to fuck everybody else over. So, it was just this really weird thing where there was a lot of information either we didn't have for a little while, or there was too much information that we had that we couldn't say anything in fear that it would jeopardize ever finishing this and getting it in the hands of people the best way. It was really dicey. There was this moment where they were like, oh, well, we're going to do your thing, but yeah, we stole everybody's money. But if you just send us all of the stuff so we can send it to all the people, but if we did that, then what would prevent them from ever not paying? I mean, it was just fucking ugly. Yeah. It was ugly, and it was just like the worst element of like corporatocracy and greedy motherfuckers, like just really fucking up a good thing. Like Pledge Music was an amazing thing, and we did lots of projects through there and just had the greatest time. And even like more so, like our fans had the greatest time. It was this beautiful thing. And then it changed hands, and like everything, it seems, these greedy sons of bitches came in there and quite literally stole tens of millions of dollars from like just normal people and the bands, and left everybody holding the bag. It's like, yeah, it was gnarly.
I mean, life is trivial, but holy shit. I mean, having to deal with that, and then to deal with trying to get a product out and trying to deal with fans.
And subsequently, I think one of the best records we've ever made, like really, like the impact of it suffered because of that whole thing.
And I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to try to be as lighthearted as possible, kind of throw some, just what if scenarios at you. If you had to, excluding Ken and Greg, has there been a musician that you've worked with that you're like, wow, I really admired?
I mean, as far as people I've worked with, I I've never had a terrible experience. So any one of those people, if I really needed to or had a bucket list and had to work with them again, I could pick up the phone and like I still have access to, I think, pretty much any person that I've ever worked with. Um, I always make it a point to, when I get in a room with somebody, like create some kind of personal relationship with them. Um, uh, Actually, in saying that, Lindsey Buckingham is the only person, if I needed to get a hold of him, I could probably get a hold of him through other people. That was probably the most spectacular person I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
That I literally, like, just the entire time was like, oh my God, like, I'm creating this great stuff with like one of my heroes who's the greatest in the same way, but even better than like everybody else that I've worked with that's just normal like me. Like, that was a really crazy gig that I couldn't shake the I'm in awe factor the
Yeah.
entire time we were working together. That was
Interesting.
on one of the Blinker the Star records.
Okay.
Lindsay was producing the record, a few songs, and requested, like asked, if it would be okay if he actually came in the room with us and cut all the tracks live and like participated in the actual live recordings as part of the band.
Interesting.
Yeah. But in saying that, I don't feel there's anybody that I've ever worked with that comes anywhere near what I create in everyday life with my band.
Yeah.
My band is, without sounding cliche, my bucket list.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change that for anything. There is nothing better than that. I would love to play with Jimmy Page. Um, you know, I think that, you know, without knowing how it is or whether he's able to do all the things that I previously heard and admire about him, I know he is. I would love to sit down and play with Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
And probably a bass player, not John Paul Jones. I mean, I wouldn't say no to that,
Yeah.
but if I had a choice, I would choose a bass player that plays different, because I wouldn't want to wind up like playing like John Bonham. Like a bass player, or
Yeah.
like an Eric Avery, or like one of those bass players who like has their own unique sound.
Well,
And the
that's
way
like
they
Rob
play.
Trujillo from Infectious Grooves. You know, he's with
Well,
Metallica.
Robert and I actually played together a few times. I got called out before I joined Failure to do some playing with oh shit, what was this fucking band called? Now I'm totally spacing out. Not Infectious Groove, but
Suicidal Tendencies.
Suicidal Tendencies. And also, I actually met Rob and played with him the first time a New Year's Eve at this place called Madame Wong's here in LA that's no longer there. And it was a jam, and it was me and him and Ice-T, and who was the guitar player? We were doing Symptoms of the Universe by Black Sabbath. It was just like a jam. And we started playing this thing, having never met each other before or played together before. Back in the day, like back in the 80s, there were some really cool things in LA like that. That I don't, maybe I'm just not in touch, but I don't think they exist like that in that way anymore. LA used to be super cool like that, where you could go somewhere and wind up playing with all these dudes that, you know, for whatever reason you didn't have access to do that type of thing, you know, in normal life. But no, it would be somebody more like not just a badass, but someone who has a unique voice, a thing that only they do, that as soon as you hear them playing, you know it's them. Mm-hmm. Because in this super group I'm building, you would have to have like 3 distinct separate types of guys that do their own thing, because I'm hoping that when you put those 3 people together, it would produce this thing that had never been heard before.
Yeah.
You know, since, you know, I'm building like this dream scenario, 3 unique voices that have never been heard outside of what they do being put together as this unique supergroup to create something that is neither of, it's not Led Zeppelin, it's not Interpol, and it's not Failure, but it has that same crazy, beautiful, larger than life relationship that each of those guys achieve in those groups to create this new. Yeah, I mean, that's my dream date.
Just to put you on the spot, are we going to have to wait till 2021 to hear some new Failure music? I mean, I know you dropped a cover just recently.
A bunch of new stuff. So hopefully that'll tide over. I mean, that doesn't mean that, maybe like November,
Okay.
when we dig into, some of the stuff that we've recently been working on, maybe a track could slip out. But I wouldn't expect like a record until 2021.
Just a little teaser, just one or two, little nuggets. That'd be nice.
Maybe. I mean, you never know.
Again,
Or maybe you'll catch me recording on something like in a little Instagram post or,
I have to put you on the spot for two other little things. Anything with the replicants, is that a overdone kind of subject, or is that something that could be revisited?
I've never been asked about it in real life on the record. No plan.
Okay.
No, there's no, you would have to talk to all like the moving parts. That's never been done.
Okay.
Like, hey, Greg, what do you think of this? Hey, Chris Pittman, what do you think of this? Hey, Maynard or.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's possible.
Anything could happen. It's 2020, so I have to throw this out there because there's really not too much on this topic. And this one band is the Brontosaurus.
There's a new record that I recorded drums for. Tony and I started working on a new record, like 3 or 4 years ago, that he hasn't finished. Who knows? Maybe he's finishing it right now. I'll find out. I'll tell him you asked me. When we get off this call, I'll go to the bathroom and I'll literally come back and text message him and say, dude, what's up? Because honestly, I haven't even thought about it. But yeah, I'll ask him.
I've got you in the hot seat. I'm like, I have to ask him because I'm going to go to sleep tonight going, I didn't ask, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt my head.
See that like pop up from time to time, and I'll go back and listen to that first record. That was a cool record. Hit him up tonight about it.
That's cool.
This record, the record we were working on is really cool. I think it's better and much more like well thought out than the first record.
All right. Interesting. Because I wasn't aware you offer lessons.
Usually I have like a little hybrid electric kit set up right here to the left of where I'm sitting.
Okay.
But since the COVID thing and not being able to, I like having like students in-house and have personal contact.
Gotcha.
I find that has much more value than, I tried the Skype thing and a couple other things, and without the bandwidth, and everyone's got to have great internet, and, it can suck.
Yeah, it could be frustrating.
It can totally suck when you're like fighting with technology to just like try and impart something new to somebody.
I'm just thinking,
really frustrating. So then person shows up, show person thing, person plays that thing, the light goes on, end of the lesson, you're like, that's awesome. I just showed somebody new and now that's theirs. And they can go home and practice it, and it can have a life of its own. That I really, really enjoy.
Just like you mentioned, I want to have human interaction. The fact that I got to do these interviews remotely, okay, fine, I can work around it. But eventually in time, I do want to have that one-on-one.
And it's special, and it's like two people, personal interaction. Like that's what we're supposed to do. People aren't meant to be at their home away from each other.
Yeah. I like to think that, again, the music that you put out there, you and your bandmates, it creates that interaction, and it makes, the world go around, and it makes it a little bit more special every time we hear a new album or a new song and the latest and greatest online. So, Kellii, thank you again for your time. Much appreciated. It was good to sit down and again, decipher, where you get your creative from and what's going on with the band.
Great interview. Like, I really appreciate it. They were awesome questions. So it was super fun for me. Be safe out there.